We are reading this morning from the Old Testament, Psalm 62, verses 5 through 12. For God alone my soul waits in silence, for my hope is from him. He alone is my rock and my salvation, my fortress, I shall not be shaken. God rests my deliverance and my honor, my mighty rock, my refuge is in God. Trust in him at all times, O people. Pour out your heart before him. God is a refuge for us. Those of low estate are but a breath. Those of high estate are a delusion. In the balances they go up. Together they are lighter than a breath. Put no confidence in extortion, and set no vain hopes on robbery. If riches increase, do not set your heart on them. Once God has spoken, twice I have heard this. The power belongs to God, and steadfast love belongs to you, O Lord. For you repay to all according to their work. The second reading today is from the New Testament, the book of Mark, chapter 1, verses 14 through 20. Now, after John was arrested, Jesus came to Galilee, proclaiming the good news of God, and saying, "The time is fulfilled, and the kingdom of God has come near. Repent and believe in the good news." As Jesus passed along the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and his brother Andrew casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. And Jesus said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you fish for people." And immediately they left their nets and followed him. As he went a little further, he saw James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John, who were in the boat mending the nets. Immediately he called to them, and they left their father Zebedee in the boat with the hired men and followed him.
This is the word of God, the people of God. God's people say, "Thanks be to God." Let us pray. Holy and gracious God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be accepting and pleasing in your sight this day. Amen. Good morning, brothers and sisters. How many of you like to tell stories? Or actually, how many of you love to tell stories? I know I love to tell stories. If nobody likes to talk about themselves? Come on! Whenever we get together with my family, Steph can attest that they like to tell stories. And there's usually a couple of stories that are favorites that they repeat over and over and over again, though there's usually some missing holes throughout those stories too, some plot holes. Narratives are how we pass on information from one generation to the next generation. These narratives are the way that we explain what has happened in not only our lives, but our family history, maybe our church's history, and in the world around us. At every stage, we will tell stories. This past week, Steph and I were able to attend the Bishop's Retreat at the Hershey Lodge down in Hershey, Pennsylvania. The speaker for the retreat was speaking about having fruitfulness in our lives. He spoke about knowing our own story, knowing what God has done through us before, and dreaming about what God can do through us in the future. These next few weeks, we're going to go through, and I know that you didn't know this ahead of time, but we're going to do it anyway. We're going to go through a sermon series on how to tell your own story with others around you. We will discover what it means to be called by God and how we can discover this calling in our lives and in the life of the church. Stories reveal every aspect of our lives, both good times, sad times, funny times, and those ones that are in between. These narratives, however, are often missing something. And so often, even with myself, the narrative is missing a link to God. Whether God was seemingly active or inactive is sometimes left out of our narrative stories. Our culture is so afraid to speak about God outside the four walls of church that we often leave him out of our conversations. Instead of asking the question, where is God in all of this, we remain silent. Or rather, worse yet, we coach ourselves into responses that are more culturally acceptable, such as, everything happens for a reason. How many of us have heard that phrase before? Everything happens for a reason. Maybe that's okay for some, but for me, that often seems like a bit of a shallow and not a real deep answer. And we are called to be deep thinkers. In our deepest pain and our most terrifying moments, the first words out of our lips tend to be something like, "Oh God," right? We even read accounts of non-religious people calling upon Jesus at that last minute because that is all they've heard religious people say today. And if there ever was a time to call upon Jesus in our darkest time, that might be the right place. I want to take a moment, and share my own story with you. Where I've come from, and why I'm here. The majority of my adult life, being that I'm only 29 years old, has been spent in school, taking classes to find that one thing that I could do the rest of my life. That's what you go to college for, right? Is to figure out what you want to do with the rest of your life. I jumped around from one job to another, trying to find what best satisfied me. I went from jobs like working as a waiter, to working in retail, to working as a construction worker, which ironically my new boss was a construction worker too. We call him a carpenter, right? I even interned for a little while at the Pentagon, looking to take a job going further into working with the government. I've been around and I've seen many different ways of life. I began college as an engineering student. I finished college with a bachelor's in business administration. I immediately left college having got this bachelor's in business administration and decided I don't want to do anything with that, so I went to seminary. I felt called and I went to seminary and I got my master's in divinity. I always enjoyed the jobs that I had. But I gotta tell you, this one's way better. To be a pastor and to talk about Jesus is way more satisfying than anything else I would have ever done. I cannot see myself investing my life into any other area in this world but to this one right here. My call to pastoral ministry comes from Paul's letter to the Corinthians. In chapter 5, the second letter to the Corinthians, in chapter 5, where Paul says that Christ's love compels us. Christ died for all, and all that are in him are made new, and as believers, we are Christ's ambassadors. My mission, my calling, is to use the gifts that God has given to me to teach, lead, and set vision for spiritual formation and evangelism. I believe that God has created me solely for this ministry. The ministry helping those who are lost to become reconciled so that they can come to church and cry because it's a safe place, right? It's my goal to equip both you and myself, both helping my clergy colleagues and those lay leaders like Bonnie or like John, to grow in the sanctifying grace and become the disciples which God has made them to be. Part of being Christian inherently means that we are called to a higher purpose. We're called to do something more. Now, each of us has our own gifts and graces. You're not going to have the same gifts as me, and trust me, I do not have the same gifts as Mary. I barely have the same gifts as these guys up here in the Gospel Airs. I certainly do not have the same gifts as someone like Phyllis. I don't have the administrative gifts as someone like Joyce. There's many of you out here that have far greater gifts than me in many different areas. But we all have a purpose. Think about our passage from Mark. In this passage, there is 4 men, 2 sets of brothers. Simon and Andrew are one set of brothers, and then James and John. These men have been working and doing what is their gift to catch a lot of fish, to provide for their families. And here comes this Jesus along who says, you know what, you probably should just stop doing that and come with me. You might think if you were them, it'd be a little crazy, right? It'd be a little terrifying, the idea of leaving your families behind, being the only one in your family that could provide for your family. But Jesus still asks them to come. He invites them to come and see what this journey has to offer. He does it in a brilliant way, because he knows as fishermen the thing that they know best is how to catch fish. And so he takes what they understand and he expands it beyond the possibilities of what they would have known. Now, how many of us have gone fishing at some point in our lifetime? How many of us have gone fishing? I have not gone very often, but as you heard me say with the children's chat just a few minutes ago, I went with Bill over here to his little spot, which, by the way, is an awesome little spot. Maybe you can coerce him into taking you. Put you on the spot, Bill. That was the first time in my life that I caught fish. So Bill's a good teacher. But some things that I do know about fishing is that you need to think about what you want to catch and get the correct bait for that fish. Because not all baits attract all fish the same. And yet people are less predictable than fish. There are certain times of the day which are better, this is something we learned from Bill, for fishing than others. I just kind of assume fish are fish, they're just going to be around no matter what anyway. It's not like they're looking up. They're just kind of looking forward. And I thought about that because there's probably certain times of life which may or may not be better than others to reach others with the gifts of God. Times when people are already asking big questions. Times of great joy and sadness, for instance. Or certain times in the year when people focus more on their faith, maybe it be Christmas or Easter. And certainly you and I, who are bearers of the good news, would do well to follow Jesus in such times and places. Certainly we're called to be as present as we possibly can be so that we won't miss an opportunity to share Christ's love. And of course there will be no fish to be caught if the water is polluted. So Bill, for instance, has to stop his lake or pond. What would you call it? A pond. Okay, stock his pond every year, but they also have to do certain chemicals to try and make sure that things stay the same and don't get out of whack, and that way the fish can be able to grow and be nurtured properly. This surely is a call to us as people of faith to care for people as they seek to meet basic needs in their lives. Maybe that means that we give to the Dalton Food Pantry. Maybe that means that we go down and volunteer at the homeless shelter or the cold weather shelter. Maybe that means that we make dresses for people in Africa. If people are hungry or afraid, for instance, they may not have the time, the energy, or the will to consider larger questions. If people are stretched too thin by the demands of everyday life, I expect the result will be the same. So see, friends, being Christian means that we're called to a higher purpose. Not only are we called to share the good news that is Jesus Christ, but we're called to meet the needs of the people too. Not just spiritually, but physically. Finally, fishing takes patience. We can't expect that everything we try to do together for mission and ministry of Jesus Christ in this world will simply work right off the bat. Sometimes we need to commit, even if it doesn't feel like it's going to work. One more thing, and here I find myself returning to where I started. In this story, Jesus calls 4 fishermen from lives they knew by heart into lives that they could not have imagined on their own. Although at least part of them must have been wondering how they were going to provide for their families and themselves, I wonder now what it is that Jesus is calling us away from and what Jesus is calling us to do, don't you? I wonder how our worlds would change, our world would change, our lives would change if we just left our nets behind and stepped into the new life before us. Friends, to have been called by God to this mission and ministry in this world is a great and wonderful thing. This church that we call the United Methodist Church was never even meant to be a church. We weren't meant to be a denomination. When John and his brother Charles Wesley sat down to start this movement, they did not want to make a new church. They wanted to reform the church of their day. They saw the brokenness of the church and how the system was no longer working for the mission and ministry of making disciples of Jesus Christ. And they sought to refocus the people on being holy and sharing God's love with others. And they called themselves evangelical. And I hope we still do. It's a trick question, of course, especially for a word that is so controversial and complex in our world today. Evangelical is one of those words that dies the death of 1,000 qualifications. That's a shame because it's an important word. Far beyond mere knee-jerk reactions, today you can read sophisticated studies about evangelicals from every imaginable perspective, both historical, cultural, ethnic, sociological, gender, economic, political, ecclesiastical, missiological, theological, and biblical. There is such a broad diversity of traditions that could be included under the umbrella of the term evangelical, such as Dutch Calvinists, African American Baptists, all manners of Anabaptists, Catholic charismatics, converts to Orthodoxy, Episcopalians in Africa, Brazil, and Korean Pentecostals, the Southern Baptist Convention, and let's not forget the original evangelicals in America, the Methodists. We were the first, thanks to the transatlantic preaching of the British John Wesley. Evangelical means to share good news. That is the definition. And that is our history. The thing that is often lost with this movement is that we don't hold true to the vision of our historical leaders, the calling that they believed in, and the same calling that Jesus gave to them and his disciples 2,000 years ago. The world needs to experience the grace of God, and though it is with them, they may not recognize it because good and faithful Christians may not be doing anything in response to the grace that is already with them too. We need to pray for our callings so that we may find where God is leading us. We need to pray and act on our callings so that others will know Jesus. We need to share our stories so that this world may be transformed by the renewing of all our minds. And we need transformation to happen in this world so that we can live as the beloved children of God that all of us here and every other person on this planet is. Can I get an amen? Amen. Friends, go forward with the blessing of Jesus Christ in your life, sharing the good news that is Christ in this world, so that this world may be transformed